Hi, my name is Ashley, and today I am interviewing Steve Russell, who is another fellow Clergy Project member with me. And we are going to find out from Steve how he got into religion, how he got into the ministry, his life as a pastor, and why he left. So please welcome Steve with me. I read what you said about your past history with the church. I know that you were a pastor in Wesleyan Churches, right?
Yeah.
And then, you and I obviously know each other from the Clergy Project. I would like to say that, I guess, straight off from the bat, that we're in the Clergy Project together. And so I suppose I just kind of wanted to walk through your story. I may be starting off with how you got involved in religion, or specifically ministry. How did you know that you were called to be a pastor, and how did all that play out?
All right. So as a teenager, I started getting really involved in the church. I was born into a pretty religious family. My grandfather and grandmother were both ministers. My great-grandfather was a minister, all in the Wesleyan Church. So my mom and dad were both heavily involved in the church. And so naturally, I was, pushed to be involved.
Yep.
So even as a teenager, I was involved with different things. I was involved in the choir, and I took care of all the lawn around the church. As I got older, we got a guy joining us. Okay. As I got older, I was more involved. I started teaching Sunday school, helped out with the youth group, assistant for a while, and then I led it. I was also on the Christian Ed board, and at some point, the pastor that had been there through most of my teenage years asked me to help start leading like Sunday morning worship. So I would read a scripture or do the announcements, or lead a song, something like that at first. But eventually I was doing all that, and he would pretty much do the sermon.
You're
Anytime he
basically
was
the assistant
gone,
pastor to him.
yeah, in some aspects, yes. Yeah, anytime he was gone, like I led everything Sunday morning, Sunday night, except doing the sermon. So shortly before he left, he sat down and told me that he really thought I was called to the ministry, and that I should, be praying about it. And so I started praying about it, and the next pastor came along, and I was doing all the same things, and he was telling me the same things. And it wasn't just them two. There were multiple people in the church that were telling me that I was destined to be a pastor. And so I threw out, the Gideon fleece, asking God for a sign. And so the first thing I prayed for was we had a church softball team. And I said,
As
okay,
most churches do.
If we lose this upcoming game, I'll know that you're calling me to the ministry, because we were playing a bad team, and we got beat really bad. And I thought it was, my fault for praying to God, for the sign. I didn't take in consideration that our team didn't win a game that year. Okay, so we stunk. But I really believe that, God was calling me to the ministry. not just because of that, but there's a few other fleeces that I set out. I was like Gideon, and kept asking for a reassurance, but for some reason these things kept happening and pointing me to the ministry. So I think it was around, let's see, a summer camp of 1995. It was church camp, and I went to the pastor at the time, and I talked to him and said, I think God is calling me to the ministry. And so we had a long talk, and I didn't tell anybody else, but like 2 days later, the evangelist had the call, come down to the altar if you're called to the ministry. And, like they always do at church camps, they always have at least one service like that. And so I went
at least
forward.
The one big one.
Yes.
There's sometimes a few other little altar calls, but you got to end it with the big bang altar call.
Right, exactly. So of course I went forward, and the church members that were there came forward and prayed for me, and it was about a year later that I left home to go to Indiana Wesleyan to start studying for the ministry. So when there, I took all your normal theological classes, and a lot of the Bible classes I didn't have to study for a lot because I knew the Bible pretty well. I don't know if you remember those. There are always those read through the Bible programs, where you.
I never did it back then, but I didn't actually read through the Bible until after Bible college, but I have heard of those, and I knew people that did them.
Okay. Yeah. So
you said, I remember you saying one time that you read through the Bible 19 times or something like that.
Yeah, it was probably, I know it was high in the teens. My grandfather, my dad's dad, who was a minister, wrote in his journals that he had read it through like 29 times or something like that.
Wow, that's so impressive.
Yeah, so me being a teenager, I think I was around 17 when he passed, so it was shortly after that I read this, and I said, well, I'm going to do the same. And so I started doing that over and over again. So when I got to college, I didn't, have to study a lot for like your basic OT classes or New Testament classes. And, I even got the nickname there of, they called me the RBS, the Resident Biblical Scholar. Because I knew the Bible a whole lot better than they did.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, I felt like I had to try to keep up with the pastors' kids and just all the kids that grew up in church and knew all of those stories, because I didn't read that when I was younger, or I wasn't raised in that. And so, there were definitely some kids that knew some of those Old Testament stories really well, that grew up and all of that. So I could totally see that you had a leg up on a lot of other people.
Yeah. So
what you were, I kind of interrupted you. You were saying something about how you were doing those, the contests to get through the Bible.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, so I had a lot of knowledge in doing that. I think I probably said what I was going to say, that, I knew the Bible well, or at least I thought I knew the Bible well. There are a lot of things when you're just reading through that you just kind of glance over and forget about, because your Sunday school and your sermons are all based around certain stories. And the church doesn't go outside of those stories. But after you read it over and over again, sometimes you start to think this is weird, or this is not something we talk about. Why would God do things a certain way? And later on, those things would start clicking with me. Like how David is called a man after God's own heart, even though he was a murderer and an adulterer and a cheater.
Yep.
Those things didn't click at the time. Later,
yeah, they glorified horrible men. They
Yeah.
did the same. They did the same with Lot. I
Yes,
think Romans calls him a righteous man. He was not a righteous man.
right. And
But yeah,
Abraham
David
lied.
and Abraham.
Oh, he not only lied a couple of times, but he almost killed his son.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what were some of the big things that you came across, biblically speaking, that were major eye openers to this is not right, this doctrine is not inerrant?
All right, so my falling away happened over like a 20-year period.
Oh,
So,
wow.
As I look back on it, one of the first cracks was when I was in college. I think it was my second semester. I had to take a theology class, and we were given a bunch of topics we could write a report on, and I chose the canonization of the Bible. And so when I was doing my studies, there were several books that almost made it into the Bible that didn't.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to find these books and read them. So I found a book that actually had them all in there, and a ton of other books that were loved by early Christians. And I went through and just started reading them, and started with the Shepherd of Hermes, the Epistle of Barnabas, and the Epistle of First Clement, which were three of the books that I remember almost made it into the Bible. And the Shepherd of Hermes, I don't know what that guy was smoking when he wrote it, but it is crazier than Revelation.
Wow. I haven't read that or any of those
well,
that you're talking about.
I actually have the book here.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know if you see that. This is the only religious book I still have. Probably because it started me on that road, and it kind of means a lot to me. And once in a while, I'll get it out and read it, knowing that it's all mythology. And like the Odes of Solomon are really beautiful writings. But of course, they're about God and stuff like that. And so you just have to take it for what it is.
Yeah.
So
you were, when you were reading those other books, were there major contradictions to what was actually canonized in the Bible?
There were a few when you get down to the ones that almost made it. At first I thought, well, a lot of it's the same, so they probably didn't need these other books or whatever.
Yeah. Where some of it made sense.
That's how my mind was justifying it. There was a lot of like numerology type stuff, kind of like how the church takes this number 666 today and tries to figure out, BS. But there's some stuff like that in it. And like I said, the Shepherd of Hermes was just crazy weird. And I was like, I don't know why anybody would want to put this in a book. But it was well loved by early Christians. So just like Revelation was. So it started me, wanting me to know why some of these books were left out and why some actually made it. Because there are a bunch of books in the Bible that, barely made it, like Revelation and Second and Third John.
Mhm.
And, the Gospels were fought over, like, why do we need four? But, eventually I found out they had to please the four different areas of the Roman Empire, pretty much. And like John is very Gnostic in its nature.
Mhm.
And so John doesn't really agree with the other three Gospels
Very
very
different
well at
from the
all.
other three.
Yeah. Um,
They don't
so
agree on basic information either.
yeah, when you read through like the last week of Jesus, all four of the Gospels disagree on so much about when he was on the cross, what day he was sacrificed. John has it on a different day than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's stuff like that you gotta go, this isn't God written.
Yeah, and written decades later, and though they weren't the
Yeah,
actual authors of the Gospels. If it was the
yeah,
inerrant word of God and it was supposed to be about the life of Jesus, you'd think that it would be all around way better than it is.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, while I was, I don't know, it was in the 90s, I read a book by Bart Ehrman, and I
Hmm.
cannot remember which one it was because I've read like 5 or 6 of his books.
Yeah.
But it was talking about our minds and how we forget things over the years. And one thing that stuck out with me was, like, in Denmark there was this plane crash, and like people were asked like a year later how many people had seen the crash, and like 50-60% of the people said, yeah, we remember seeing video of the crash, and there was never video of the crash. And that was 1 year
Wow.
after the event. And you think about, let's see, Mark was written someplace around 65, which would have been 30 years after
32
Jesus.
years later, yeah.
Yeah. And you think how our minds would have twisted things in those 30 years.
Super long game of telephone.
Yes, exactly what it is. So,
And
yeah,
we don't know how literate they were either.
right. Yeah. I was trying to think, which book was it? I think it was Who Wrote the Bible? Not by Mac. That's a different one. Richard Freeman goes into only like 5% of the world knew how to read and write at that time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. There would have been a few other people, you think of the disciples, if they were actually people, like Matthew would have been the only one possibly who could have done some math or written a name because he was a tax collector. The
Yeah.
rest of them, fishermen and stuff like that, they never would have been able to. They would have signed a tax for their name.
Yeah, it would have been shocking if they would have known how to write much.
Yeah. Yeah. And even Jesus, he never would have been able to read or write, even though the one gospel says he wrote in the sand. At best, he was drawing pictures in the sand.
Yeah. That's probably what happened. I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
So how long were you in the ministry or part of leadership in the church before you started to question?
Um,
I know you said
Boy.
it was like a 20-year process, but I guess when you kind of, washed your hands of it to the point where you were like, I really can't do this anymore, and you walked away.
Oh, I was probably had been a pastor probably at least 10 years before, maybe even longer. I was in the ministry about 13 years total.
And you
And it
still
was
have
the
a lot of
last couple.
family involved in your church community too?
Yeah, I have a brother who's a minister. Um, a lot of my family still goes to church. I mean, my mom and dad are still very faithful goers, even though they're 85 to 90 years old. Um, and
Did it
I
affect
got,
your relationship with any of your family? How did they respond?
um,
I'm okay asking that. We could skip past
yeah,
that if
you're
you want.
fine asking me. Um, they won't talk to me about religion. Um, I will post stuff on Facebook, and seldom do they ever get involved with
Or
any
acknowledge it.
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I've talked to my mom on the phone, she avoids it, even though that's one of the most important things in her life. When I talk to dad, we will talk about church and stuff like that. He's the only one who will uh, ever discuss things with me. He doesn't acknowledge that I'm an atheist or anything like that. He will uh, almost like nothing's changed. He doesn't want to
Yeah.
admit it.
Well, but at
Um,
the same time, that's still really cool that they treat you the same,
yeah. Well,
at least for the most part.
I get a lot of cold shoulders. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, for a long time. I mean, my mom and I never had a great relationship, but for a long time it was bad that uh, when I would call her on Christmas or Mother's Day, it was like a 5-minute discussion and she was by. You know, um, lately it's been a little bit better, but unfortunately she's I think 86 or so. So we don't have a whole lot of time left to heal.
Yeah.
Um, so
Wow. That's really sad.
yeah,
It's,
you know, yeah. I mean, one of the hardest things I had to do was tell mom I'm not going to church, uh, and it was after that that I got a lot of cold shoulders and family telling me that I know better. I should. I'm a
what you've
pastor. I should know
experienced.
better. Yeah. And I wanted to tell him, yeah, I do know better. That's why I'm not going to church. you
Yep.
know,
Yeah. You don't
and
even know how
so
much I know.
yes, yes, because you won't listen to me.
No, most of the time that's not usually how it goes either. I mean, uh, I didn't have very many conversations, or if I can think of any at all, where somebody actually was like, please tell me why. I want to know why.
Yeah,
And
nobody's
listen to
asking
it
why.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
did your family follow behind you, like your wife and kids and all of that?
Well, I don't have any kids,
Oh,
um,
okay.
but my wife, we kind of went together. Um, she was one of the first, like shortly after we were married, she started questioning me about hell and how a loving God could, damn someone forever just
Mm-hmm.
because of 50, 60 years or even 15 years of life here, and they didn't believe.
Yeah.
And like with a lot of people who ask me questions, it was, I'll get back to you. I'd go to the Bible, I'd read books, I'd search for the information, and I'd come back with some kind of answer. And with that, I really couldn't answer that. I was like, I don't know why. And so I started dropping the idea that hell even existed. Or if it did, it was for the really, really bad people. For a while, your mind constantly tries to twist things to make it right so that you can still hold on to this belief. Because I'd been, indoctrinated at that time for, 35 plus years.
Yeah.
One of the books that really changed my idea on hell was by Philip Gulley. I'm trying to remember. If Grace is True. And I read several books by him, but it talked about if grace was really true, there is no hell. Because no loving God would send people to hell.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Or the majority. I mean, like the road to heaven is very narrow too. I mean, why would he want to send the majority of people there?
Yeah. Later on, I got to those verses and said, yeah, there's no hell for anybody. And either we all go to heaven or we all cease to exist. It's one or the other. And eventually I came to the point where we just cease to exist.
Yeah, I know. That was the first theology that I dropped too, was hell. That was, where I thought, why is it any more complicated than, like you're saying, we just cease to exist and we are just in a grave or cremated. I mean, why do we think that it's any more than that? It's silly looking back on it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hold on to it, or the idea of heaven and hell, partly because this life sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
And they want something better.
Mm-hmm.
And they want justice for the people who are thieves and corrupt and get away with it.
Yeah.
And I think I held on to it because I wanted a God of love. I grew up in a very unloving house. I don't remember my parents saying I love you until I was like 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
There were no hugs, there were no kisses, nothing. And so I think, I held on to a God of love and I wanted to be loved. And what is better than having God of all the universes love you?
Yeah. And all the different hats that he has, all the different attributions that he has, attributes, he's our father.
Yeah.
He takes on those roles in our life when we have a void there.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what we thought.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, wow. I'm sorry to hear that though, but so what was life like for you after you left and you decided to, I know you work in a school now and you have a secular job. What was it like going into the real world and leaving and trying to do all that again? Or maybe not again, just trying to do that for the first time, really.
Yeah. Well, I did have a secular job right out of high school. So I went to school when I was 25. So I was doing it again. So it was hard. The hardest thing was losing our social base.
Yeah.
Um, it was like, man, we don't know what to do socially, because all of our lives were built around the church and the church activities. And we were there Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesdays, and
Yeah.
then Saturdays we'd have events during the month, and there'd be Bible studies here and there, and so that was our lives. And so it was just really, really difficult suddenly having nothing. It's like, where do we go? Where do we fit in? We didn't have a whole lot of friends outside of the church. I had a few friends at work, but I didn't hang out with them a whole lot. So that was the hardest thing that we had to do.
Yeah.
We got involved in like a free thought group in the area. And we found a bunch of former ministers. So
in the area you did?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Our friend's back. He's nosy. Yeah. In fact, one's a former Mormon minister, and he's gay.
So, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, that didn't go over too well in the Mormon church. So
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I bet not. Jeez.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
But we get together from time to time, and for a while we would discuss how hard it is to get out of the church, but now we've kind of moved beyond that.
Yeah.
It's been, I was trying to remember, about 7 years or so.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if I asked you how long it had been. 7 years. Yeah. What's a good amount of time?
It would have been 2012, the last time I pastored. And
okay.
then we went to a pretty liberal church in the area for about a year.
Oh, okay, so you did some in-between stuff for a little while.
Yeah, I hadn't quite given up on God, but when I went there, it's like, how do so many people read the Bible and come up with so many different ideas? In some place in my research, I was like, there are 40,000 denominations of Christians in the world.
Yep.
And they all think they're right. And God was supposed to have written this perfect book. It was so clear, right?
Yeah, we can't even agree on like baptism.
Yes, or communion. Some of the stupidest little things. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that was one of my eye openers too. Was, so if this is supposed to be perfect, why do we all disagree on all of the information?
Yes, exactly.
So silly, but that's super cool though that you and your wife both got out together. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think she left the church mentally before I did. The last year or two of ministry, she really didn't attend much at all.
Oh, wow. Good for
her. And I think it was a lot of her high anxiety about being around certain people there that made our lives miserable. That just made her feel sick a lot, so she stayed home, and I was really just fulfilling my duties, especially the last year. The last year we knew pretty much the entire last year that this is our last year here. We're just going to make it through. And the pastor there tried to get out of us so many ways. about why we were leaving. And, I tried to talk to him and the board about the problems with the church, and they were very evangelical, fundamentalist. And at that time, there was that big gay homosexual stuff going on, the gay marriage thing going on. And, like, the pastor was like, you got to tell the teens that gay marriage is wrong and gays are evil and stuff like that. And I basically told him I couldn't.
Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when it first started, I grabbed every book that I could on the subject by religious leaders and read, and found out that nobody agreed on anything. And like everything else in the Bible, nobody agrees.
Yeah.
And so my last few years everything was like a humanist perspective. I was teaching love, taking care of each other, stuff like that. And so I had to go with, you just love one another,
Mm-hmm.
If there is a God, let him sort them out.
Did you have like a big exit, or did you leave quietly? I mean, were you hinting in any of your messages to people like, hey, I don't believe this. I believe that we just need to love each other, treat each other with respect? Or how did that whole thing end?
Yeah, we tried to leave as quietly as possible. We didn't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
There were some things in my messages. I remember one message I did on Noah's flood, and how I talked about the Hebrew word in there for worldwide could mean anything from the local town to the entire world. And I told them, how do we speak today? We say, the whole world, but what we really mean is our area.
Yeah, our world.
Our world. Yeah. So it's like, most likely this was just a regional flood. It was probably the worst flood they'd had in 30 years or whatever. And this is something they remembered. And I remember one old gal up in the front seat saying, I don't believe that. So
it had to have been the whole world.
Yeah, it had to have been the whole world. Even though
she literally shouted out.
Yes, she did.
That's funny.
And I told her, well, you have to have some backing for that. And
yeah,
that
just
went on with the rest of my message. But I try to throw in my messages some hints like, this isn't quite right.
That's cool.
And try to make people think. I know, like a year later, one of the teens, because I was the youth and children's minister there, one of the teens told me that the guy that replaced me told them that I was like the worst thing that ever happened to the church. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I bet hopefully some of those kids are not falling for it. I mean, not most of them. I'm sure there's a few, but
right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, the only one that we have real contact with, she's still Christian, but she's very liberal. So at least that's good.
Yeah. I've had a lot of communication, mostly with the kids that were in the youth group when I was a pastor out there still. Sometimes I feel kind of guilty for being so open about my atheism because of the role I played in their life at one point. But now I almost feel like they're still young enough. I could help save them. Like, here's some knowledge. Look into this, please. Save yourself.
Yeah, I went through that too. Like, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to hurt people that I really love. But at the
Yeah.
same time, they need to know the truth, and they need to know that they're being lied to and taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been, I get in moods where I'm very forceful and put stuff out, and then I back off for a while. Um,
Yeah, I go through that too.
yeah,
Or I feel like this is like my due diligence. I need to, or like my civic duty to provide this information. Hey, look into this. It's all a lie.
yeah, yeah,
And then other times it's like, you got to try, it seems like a lot of people don't want to talk about politics and religion and stuff, but
right,
I don't know, but it just seems like it's such a big thing right now. And
yeah,
it's taken over our country, both sides,
yeah,
politically and religiously, and it's a
yeah.
mess.
I will say politics is one of the areas where I think that's the first area really where I started disagreeing with the religious right. And like I was like 11 years old when I started seeing things.
Oh, wow.
And I went to my parents about it, and my mom basically told me to shut up and believe the way that I'm taught, because Christians don't believe the way you do. And I was like, but the Democrats take care of the poor and the needy a whole lot better than the GOP does.
Yes, they do.
uh,
Yeah.
so
I think
so
my big
eventually,
awakening was like politically was what was that, 2012, those elections?
mhm,
Am I thinking of the right year?
and that's the year Obama
Yeah,
defeated, who did he run
Romney.
against? Yeah,
Yeah. I remember that, and that was like when I first started deconverting. That had to have been right before you did, because I'm like 8 years out, 8.5. So I'm like a year
okay, yeah,
before you. And there was a lot going on then, but then this last election was really ramped up.
yeah,
And like our country is completely split in half, separated, even more so.
yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah,
extremists. A lot of the right wing is this very evangelical Christian, you know, Pentecostal world, is very
yeah,
mixed together right now. And it's kind of
yeah,
scary.
yeah, yeah. I've got a lot of family members who are caught up in the Trump cult,
Yeah, me
um,
too.
and friends, and yeah, some of them have, you know, basically unfriended me on Facebook and won't talk to me anymore, because I those people, I use the Bible against them because they are so unloving in their stances. I use all the Bible verses that say to love one another and to treat each other right and stuff like that, and they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. It doesn't even seem like it's about that anymore for a lot of them out there.
No, no,
It's yeah, it's really sad. But it's really it feels, I'm sure for you too can attest to this, that it just feels really good nowadays to be on this side of things, you know,
yes,
during all of
yeah,
this, to not still be a religious leader.
oh yeah, yeah. I would hate to have a church full of people like that because it would drive me crazy.
Yeah, I don't
And
even know
yeah,
what I would do.
yeah.
It's crazy. So what advice would you give to anybody listening? I mean, obviously we're not trying to like deconvert people or anything, but if anybody on their own is in a place of doubt or skepticism and they're watching this, whether they're a leader in church, or if they're just attending church. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is questioning, especially maybe if they came from a situation like you where their family is very much involved in this community as well?
Yeah, this was hard because we all go through different stages, but we all go through the grief stages where we get mad and angry, and sometimes we cry, and we want to go back because that's our safety net. That's what we know. To those who are questioning, keep questioning. There's reasons why you're questioning, and keep looking for those answers. When I went on my journey, it was the questioning and people answering or asking me questions that brought me to where I am today, because the Bible did not have the answers. And also that there's a lot of people out there who are like you, and I think we're just beginning to voice ourselves. And the more that we get out here and the more we voice what the church is really like and what religion is really like, the better this world is going to be. So we need you to come out, but if you're not ready, that's fine. Talk to those who are. There are plenty of online groups, whether it's Facebook or whatever you're into, that have private groups that you can go in there and you can talk to people who are questioning or who have come out, and they will just listen to you and help you find your way. And it's going to take some time. I mean, it wasn't day one when I told my mom that I was no longer going to church. It was probably a couple of years before I did that, and it was probably a couple of years before I started posting anything on Facebook or any social media, because I had to get my mind clear about what I really believed. So when you're ready, come out, but not until you're ready. Find a few good friends that you can talk to, and and that they will listen to you. Because I find a lot of church people won't listen to you. Mm-hmm. But I found a lot outside the church who will. So find those people and just blurt out whatever's on your heart, and keep seeking those answers. It's probably the best advice I could give anybody who's searching right now.
Oh, yeah, that's really great advice. Sorry. That's really great advice. Yeah, I definitely concur on the being ready. You don't want to make a rash decision to be huge, open, honest, dramatic thing. It doesn't usually work out as well as you think it would, unfortunately. And lots of groups out there that are willing to help online, freedom from religion, recovering from religion, and obviously the Clergy Project that we're in. If you're a minister,
if you have like a free thought group in your area, find those people. So it's always better to do it in person and sit down and talk than I find on the computer. So
yeah, probably, definitely. I haven't done that myself, met up with anybody in person. I think I mean, you and I live pretty close to each other. I think it'd be cool if, your wife and you and my husband and I got together. I know you guys like to go hiking and stuff and on trails.
Yeah,
It'd be kind of fun to kind of do some of that together and, um, make friends with
yeah,
other people who are former pastors and
yeah,
left.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No,
this was a good conversation. I feel like I feel like it's been a long time coming. I haven't actually physically had a conversation with you before.
right. Yeah. Oh.
So it was
Yeah,
great
I was
getting
kind
to
of,
know you a little bit more. You were kind of what?
well, I was kind of like somewhat nervous about this because it's like this is the first time I've ever sat down and really told my story
Oh,
uh,
really?
to anyone. I've told bits and pieces from to people from time to time, but um, it feels good to get it out there and hopefully it helps people.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are probably going to come across this video that are in the same exact situation that you were in, where they grew up with family that basically encouraged them to go into the ministry and now they're in the ministry.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
yeah, and your realizations of scripture and your wife as well on hell, I think that is definitely stuff that somebody out there can identify with.
yeah, I'm
'Cause,
sure.
yeah. So yeah, I'm really glad that I got to know you, and thank you for coming on here and talking with me and being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Well, thanks for doing this. Um, I really love doing it, and if you ever want to do another interview sometime about any
Yeah,
other topics,
for
whatever
sure.
you
Yeah, we could talk about
involved with,
all anything else, really. That'd be
yeah,
fun.
it would be.
Yeah, cool. Okay, sweet. Well, yeah, I mean, if you think of something, you can get a hold of me or whatever, and we can do this again if you're interested.
I would
So
love to.
sweet. Cool. Well, it was nice getting to know you a little bit more.
You too, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, have a good night.
All right, you take care.